Good evening, everyone. Let's just give a few more minutes for other people to join. It appears as if we don't have our usual number of people in the room. I just want to spend 2 more minutes to wait for other people to join us, and then we'll start at 6:19. Punctuality is a great thing, but a lot of people have that summer fever right now. Mr. Delman, I would like to welcome you to our committee as a newly appointed member. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wedderburn.
Chairperson Wedderburn, are you able to share your screen tonight to pull up the carbon neutrality document?
I'm actually on my phone and not on my computer, so the answer is no.
Is there any other committee member, thank you, Chairperson Wedderburn, is there any other committee member using a PC that is capable of sharing their screen for the carbon neutrality document? It would make it so much easier for the committee to discuss it.
Sure, I can do it.
I use a Mac and it's not really compatible with WebEx for sharing. I've added the carbon neutrality link in the chat. Thank you so much. Oh, was that Mr. Doman that said yes?
Sorry, I did say yes, but I'm also on a Mac. I don't know if that's going to be an issue.
It absolutely will be. Anyone?
Okay, sorry.
Is anyone on a PC that can share their screen for this document? And then the silence is deafening. I shall figure it out.
Thank you, Julia. Really appreciate it. All right. Good afternoon.
I'm on a PC. I can do it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Callahan. Always a lifesaver. Thank you. And also, board members, Mr. Witherwax did submit to you guys a 2-page, I call it a cheat sheet for this carbon neutrality. Basically, it just plucks out the main points and iterations. I'm going to quickly download it and drop it to a Dropbox link. That way, the whole committee can have access to it. Mr. Callahan, you should already have it. If not, I will put it in the Dropbox link. I just need 2 minutes to be able to download it, get it in, and then that can be something that can be shared as well. It's not as dense as it initially appears. But Mr. Witherwax's cheat sheet does make it a lot easier to just pull out the more controversial or issues that might arise if this document is passed as presented.
Ms. Neal, I am sorry to put you on the spot. After you download, and we'll start our Hester Street presentation. After the Hester Street presentation, can you call the roll, please? Because again, I'm limited as to what I can do on my phone. I apologize in advance and will apologize tomorrow.
Not a problem. No apologies necessary.
Ms. Neal, did you send it to me as a chat link, or where is it right now?
The carbon neutrality document is in the chat. It's the first thing in the chat, and I just need
Oh.
2 minutes to get that document downloaded
Yep.
and added to a Dropbox link.
I must have joined after you sent the link, so just when you get a chance, just
It's right there.
thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work, as the district manager Michelle George says.
All right, so in the interim, we have 2 items that are being presented. Can you verbally give me a clue who is representing Hester Street? We don't have a representative from Hester Street. Okay. Do we have the representative from City of Yes?
Chairperson, the carbon neutrality is something that you and your committee members will have to lead and discuss. That's why it's imperative to share the screen.
Okay.
But it's 45 more seconds and that Dropbox link will be there.
Wasn't my expectation. Everyone, thank you for being as flexible as you are. I see some faces in the audience, or I should say I see some names in the audience from people that I've met while we were attending the Atlantic Avenue mixed use plan, various workshops. So I'm particularly saying hello to Miss Hutchinson.
Hey, how are you?
I am well, thank you.
Chairperson Wedderburn, it seems like you do have a quorum, but I can go ahead and just do the roll if you just want to verify, and we can get started with the discussion.
Please, and thank you.
Okay. Pierre Albert.
Present.
Albert Appleton.
Present.
Lisa Atkinson. Princess Ben James.
Present.
Robert Callahan.
I'm here.
Edward Delman.
Here.
Michael Francoeur. Najani Granville. I saw Ms. Granville. Thank you, Ms. Granville. Karen Gray.
Here.
Jennifer Jordan.
Here.
Zerzima Jordan.
Yeah.
I saw her name. I'll come back to her. Thank you, Miss Jordan the younger. Peter Crashes.
Here.
Nicole Limla. Miss, can you please just one more time tell me the proper pronunciation of your last name?
You were super close. It's Lemle.
Limla. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Francis Langley. Dr. Sarah Lazar.
Here.
Thank you. Kwasi Menza. Mimi Mitchell.
Here.
Thank you. Robert Puka. Jack Robinson.
Here.
Kim Robinson. Mark Thurton. Ethel Tyus, Gib Vaconi, Sharon Wedderburn,
Here.
Elaine Weinstein,
Here.
and Deborah Young. Okay, you need one more member, and that would be Miss Jordan. Miss Jordan, the elder, have you returned to the room yet? She has not.
I'm here. This is Miss Granville. I was out of the room when you called my name, but I'm here.
Thank you. Miss Granville, I had you. You came in just as I was leaving. Miss Jordan, I have you now. Miss Chairperson Wedderburn, you do have a quorum right now. You have 16 members present.
Thank you so much, Ms. Neal.
I didn't hear my name, but Anika Roach is here.
Hi, Miss Roach. You are a new member. I can quickly add you if you are interested in signing up as a voting member of the Land Use Committee. It is a commitment. Are you willing to make that commitment?
Yes.
Okay. Then Miss Wedderburn, you have 17 members present.
Ms. Roach, welcome to the world of land use. It will never be boring. I think my committee members would agree with that, right? So it was not my expectation that we were going to lead this conversation tonight. So I'm going to ask questions and I want everybody to chime in because I'm not going to lecture. So why are we here? Why are we having this discussion tonight? Really?
Well, we have a climate change issue coming up, and the government has mandated a lot of changes that we need to have homeowners, communities, and entire cities and states have got to make changes, whether it's moving towards solar power because they want to go more towards electric, and so many other issues that we're facing that the money has come down, the funding has come down, and it has to start getting implemented. People have to start being notified, and then implementation.
Thank you, because certainly one of the issues that we as a community board deal with is that as appointed members, we are voices and representatives from different segments of our community, particularly in land use. There's some things that are going to, with regard to community solar. Not only will we see changes should it be implemented, but we also have to take a look at what will happen, particularly in landmarking vis-a-vis buildings. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in, and we've had discussion about, is implementing solar as landmark projects that come before us in landmark districts. We already know from a long conversation 2-3 months ago that the process for putting in solar or installing solar panels on flat roofs, because most of the buildings in our historic districts are flat roofs, is a different approval process from what we see as standard in landmarking. So having a separate process and not being aware of all the processes that would be involved is challenging. So a change is coming. 2, money has been let for the transition to solar. 3, I believe there's a 2030 or 2035 deadline in order that we can decarbonize, that we're contributing less carbon. I know Mr. Callahan's one of Mr. Callahan's bedrock phrases is in regards to the use of automobiles. One of the things that we don't have is adequate electric infrastructure to encourage individuals to in New York City to be able to buy automobiles and be in electric automobiles and be in a position to regularly charge it, as many would. As many of you know, you may have friends in the suburbs that they change their there's an outlet available to them within their garage to do so. New York City, alternate side of the street parking, and the fact that private automobiles do not have designated places to park within our communities is a challenge, and it will not encourage people to buy said automobiles. So, we really have to look at the community solar and our other renewable energy. And saying that, let's take it, for example, let's look at what vehicle parking would look like on a residential street. And one of the things that we're concerned about is having primary usage. So we have a home that is the primary use of a residential lot. When you have a home, if we make a change towards primary use with an allowed accessory use, then that would facilitate, more opportunities to have charging. What we don't want to do is individuals creating, on lots, charging parking lots, so to speak. So, just looking at that and taking that into consideration. So when you have parking spaces, many of the large apartment buildings that were built in the 1950s and late 60s, my reference point for the most part is outside of the district, where you see Mitchell Lammers or buildings that have been in Mitchell Lammers. Ebbets Field had been a Mitchell Lammer project at its inception, and they have outdoor parking lots. There are also Mitchell Lammers that are located along Lafayette Avenue, and they have designating parking. Within our district, the only designating parking areas we have is within our high-rise NYCHA buildings located at Albany Houses, which is between Park and Bergen, between Troy and Albany, and they have open outdoor parking spaces. And what can happen with that is that we can the zoning can encourage that you have canopies. So that would be an additional use for having solar power in addition to solar power on the roof. One of the things that we currently see is that our building code does not allow for us to retrofit buildings to allow for the use of solar and more efficiency based upon a floor area ratio. So that's something that we would have to carefully consider. Do we want to increase the floor area ratio so that we can retrofit? And that is a question to all.
Okay, and I just, Chairperson Wedderburn, I just want the committee to be reminded that the carbon neutrality is a zoning text amendment. There are 17 different proposals, and if the 17 or some of the 17 are enacted, then that becomes the city's current zoning guideline. Everything that Ms. Wedderburn alluded to just a few moments ago are the existing conditions and what zoning does and does not allow for. These proposals will allow changes to that to make it easier to, A, as Ms. Wedderburn said, allow for covered parking spaces, B, allow for additional on-street charging stations. There would be more sharing of the street. It would allow for greater solar panel usage on rooftops. Yes, that includes the historic districts, which is why the Land Use Committee is so integral to this conversation. It would also allow for easing some of the regulations on rooftop gardens. So the committee really needs to dive into the 17 proposals to see what the long-term impacts would look like on the city streetscape in terms of land use and development.
Thank you, Ms. George. So Karen, I
Oh
see
my
your
God,
raised
no
hand.
mistaken identities here. It's Julia, not Michelle.
I'm sorry. No impersonation. It's great. I see you have a raised hand. Go ahead.
Yes.
And then Mr. Todd.
I attended the session 2 weeks ago, I think it was, with Congresswoman Clark on the carbon issue and the funding and everything. And it's interesting, a lot of things came up. When you mentioned the housing and the flat roofs, etc., more popped out where that is. Some of the concerns and what people have experienced, people were sharing, is that they went solar and then a high building pops up and they get blocked. So this is something that has to be really paid attention to. Because if people are going to do that, then we have to pay attention to it. Two, these solar companies that pop up and say, we're going to do it. Yeah, we charge you X amount of dollars. We're going to come put the panels on. But then something goes slightly wrong with it and you try to find that company and they're gone. They just came in, got money and left. So that's two. Three, some people, roof might need repair after, you put it on. Is the solar company gonna assist you in removing those panels? so that you can get a new roof or roof repair and get them back on. So those were some concerns that were raised at the meeting I attended at Downstate.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Very insightful. Mr. Todd? Greg Todd? Mr. Todd, your hand is raised.
Hello?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. Anyways, by way of introduction, I'm an old member. I joined in 2002, and since about a year ago, moved upstate New York, way upstate New York, to a little town called Canton. And interestingly, there are no fewer than 5 solar array projects going in Canton right now, with the largest of which is over 2 square miles of solar arrays. And all of that electricity is coming to New York City. And it's creating a huge tumult because you imagine what 2 square miles of solar panels looks like in a little village. And the thing that gets me is that we could easily put, well more than, I mean, actually altogether, there's over 5 square miles of solar arrays going in upstate New York in various municipalities. And the problem is that you've got to ship all the electricity down to New York City. And it takes hundreds of miles of copper wire and hundreds of structural towers to hold all those panels of those wires up, which need to be maintained over decades. Meanwhile, we could easily put 5 square miles of solar panels on rooftops in New York City and not have the infrastructure requirement. So I just point that out is like, I'm wondering why, and the interesting thing is that the company that's developing most of these panels, most of these solar sites is a French company, not even an American company. And I'm just wondering why America is so behind the curve on this and why we can't put 5 square miles of solar panels on rooftops with like, you're not taking over 5 square miles of farmland. You're not shipping it hundreds of miles, and it's right there. So I just think the silliness of the whole thing is really hits me. Why aren't we just doing this here rather than shipping it hundreds of miles and taking over 5 square miles of farmland upstate? So, thanks.
Thank you. So in the order in which I saw the raised hands, I'm going to call upon Mr. Callahan and then Ms. Lazar.
Hello. I wanted to say that I've gone pretty much all the way towards getting solar on my own roof. We ended up not doing it, but I have a lot of sort of direct knowledge with the experience here. And wanted to say to one of the points that Ms. Gray put in about sort of the fly-by-night companies that have started to exist, because they're giving these guarantees for 30 or 50 years or whatever, some extended amount of time, and the companies existed for 2 months or 2 years or whatever, so longer than they've existed. So I think that's something that if you're going to go through this process to be mindful of is looking for a company that's guarantees are backed by some sort of insurance that is outside of their own company, because a lot of the ones that I've seen, they offer sort of a protection that is essentially an insurance company that underwrites the process of building and maintaining the guarantees on the solar arrays over long term. So I think that's really critical to be looking into the companies that you're dealing with. But no, I think the other points are really well taken. One of the things that was really important is to remember that if you're gonna get one of these arrays on your roof, that it is essentially a completely separate financing arrangement that could complicate your homeownership. Sort of like it's another thing you'll have to deal with if you ever sell the house and you haven't paid off the solar array yet. So it can get quite complicated, and it's really important to consider all the points. But that being said, I do think that this is something that's completely accomplishable, and something we should be working towards is having rooftop solar. And I would put in a plug that that my office controller's office, we have a chief climate officer who has really dug in on public solar. And I would look into the proposals that Louise has put together for public solar that have in some ways been adopted by the mayor's office, and in other ways we want to push them to go a little further. So that's what I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Callahan, if you would bring that resource to the committee for our review after this meeting, it would be so greatly appreciated.
Certainly.
Sarah Lazor.
Yeah, thank you for calling on me. So a few things. One question that I kind of have, and maybe this doesn't have to do with the zoning factor exactly, but this is all new to me. I'm wondering, so in residential buildings that are owned by a landlord, there are the energy uses that are of the building itself, and then there's the energy use of the individual units. The landlord is paying for the building use, and the tenants are usually paying for the electricity in their apartment. And something I've wondered is whether the electricity generated by, solar on the roof could, be used towards the benefit or, lowering the bills of the actual tenants, or if it's only going to end up benefiting the landlord. That would be a shame. Another comment, well, this is more like a question. I don't fully understand the part of the presentation that talks about accessory use, like accessory versus non-accessory. And maybe if somebody were able to explain that, that would be awesome. It's on slides 20 through 22. And then third comment, and I promise I'm done. So they were talking about the energy storage stations and how those are allowed on M-zoned areas, and I'm wondering if that's something that could be compatible with the M-Crown area. What the picture that they have looks like a very large installation, so I don't know if there would be room for something that large, but I'm just wondering, I don't really know anything about these energy storage stations. Are they compatible with being with, alongside residential? Are they noisy or noxious, or are they totally, uh, you know, are they the kind of thing that would maybe have no conflict with people, and maybe that would be something that creates jobs? I don't know. It's just a thought that went through my head. So those are my three things.
So would anyone like to offer any thoughts as to what Sarah has just offered to the committee?
Madam Chair, this is Ethel Tyus.
Yes, Ms. Tyus.
I would like to say that I have the same concerns that Sarah is voicing. I would ask, if I were the landlord for a particular building, I would ask my tenants to join together for the benefit of Mother Earth and provide their billings for the past year or two from Con Ed, so that the number of solar panels needed to supply the entire building could be investigated and planned for. I went through Solar One. I can provide that link in the chat. I think they're still working on doing group purchases. They have what I call a beauty pageant for would-be clients in a area that's fairly contiguous. Various solar panel vendors are asked to present their offerings, and the group that's Solar One has put together select one vendor out of the group, 4 or 5 different vendors, and they get a discount price based on volume. I got 24 panels for 2 family. I got credits from New York State. I got credits from New York City. It took me a year to pay it off. I think it all came out to about $40,000 for 24 panels. Keep in mind that every year, the manufacture of these panels improves. Okay, so you have that. Sarah's right. You have to know that your tenants are going to work with you to get the best use out of the solar panels. So I think it's worth the effort. You're going to have tenants that are going to go out to work and leave everything in the apartment running. But on the other hand, it beats continuing to burn gas and oil to supply the building with the energy it needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tynes. Ms. Weinstein, I'm sure Gib Vaconi's hand is raised because Sarah asked a particular question about the compatibility. Oh, he put his hand down. So I'm going to say Ms. Weinstein and then Ms. Davis.
Thanks so much. I live at Newswalk, which is a condominium, so it's not about rental. But one thing that I would add is that we had, I think it's called Brooklyn Solar, come to evaluate the situation. It was interesting because given the wind shear, flat roof, and the position of the building and the number of hours of sun, it wasn't the building, it was Brooklyn Solar that denied putting it up or even going forward with the project. So if we're looking for responsible vendors, I would suggest they were very responsible. They worked with us. They said it would not be beneficial, and we were turned down. What could be better than a company trying to make money turn down potential people or potential clients because it was not the most productive positioning of the building and the hours of sun. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Ms. Davis?
Hi, I'm a real novice to this. And so my question is, what is the relationship of Con Edison with this process?
I would actually have to say I don't know, except that we're generating a solar panel generates power outside of the existing suppliers, and such that generally speaking, the end users, the customers of Con Ed, have a reduced electric bill and perhaps something coming back into their pockets because of excess generation.
Madam Chair, you're absolutely correct. Con Ed years ago asked the state for $20 million to upgrade the Brownsville station. That's when the state started giving credits to homeowners for solar panels.
Well, who do you pay? Do you pay Con Ed?
Let me just answer your original question.
I'm sorry.
In response to homeowners putting solar panels on their roof, or if you have a shade tree covering your roof, put it in your backyard. So Con Ed does what they call net metering. What your solar panels produce that you don't use goes to Con Ed and you get a credit on your account. Thank you.
So I'm going to raise call in the order in which I saw hands. So that would be Mr. Vaconi, Karen Gray, and Mark Gibb.
Hi, sorry about that. It sounds like we're kind of getting into a discussion about how to go about installing solar at your building. And I don't know if that was what we were shooting for or not here, but Con Ed does support people, obviously, as Ms. Tyus said, installing solar and connecting to the grid. And you pay an $18, we all pay an $18 a month connection fee to be connected to Con Ed. And if you generate more power than you use from Con Ed, you'll get a credit. And if you generate less, you'll get a bill for your electric usage. But on a typical row house in this part of Brooklyn, you should be able to locate enough panels on your roof to cover your monthly electric bill in the warmer months. At least that's been our experience. We put in solar a couple of years ago, and it has been very effective. There are a lot of different solar installers. If you're going to do it, you should get multiple quotes. Some of the installers that have been mentioned in this discussion market very assiduously in Brooklyn, but in my experience, are not the low-cost providers. So if you decide you want to do it, make sure you get a few bids for the installations because the prices can vary pretty significantly. And then lastly, there are some pretty good credits, tax credits and rebates left available for people installing solar that can definitely reduce the cost of ownership and shorten the payback time. So again, the payback time is what it's all about, and that's why you really want to get multiple quotes and get the best price you can possibly find. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Vacconi. Ms. Gray?
Some of the mortgage brokers that I deal with had told me, like out in Rosedale and other areas, that some people were running into where they want to refi, and I think Mr. Callahan, if I'm not mistaken, talked about the financing, and some people wanted to refinance their buildings after, and some banks were giving them a hard time when they have the solar on them. So there's something that came up in this session called the Green Bank that seems to help people who are experiencing stuff like that. So just thought I'd put it out there.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Ms. Wedderburn, if I
Yes,
may, can I just try to bring the committee's attention back to the fact that the City of Yes carbon neutrality document is a series of 17 zoning text amendments that will become the city's standard building and development code. It will be added to that. And these are proposals that will affect life in the city as we know it moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Mr. Thurton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concern is with the landmarks. I mean, because their statement here is kind of vague and broad. Is Landmark going to adjust their criteria to meet this new solar requirement, or are they just going to limit us on what we can do? Because what the limitation now is kind of discouraging for being on in a landmark to do the solar.
Chairperson Wedderburn, I can actually answer that question. A couple of weeks ago, LPC actually did have a meeting where they are actually entertaining LPC guideline changes that would disallow solar installation to be brought before the full board. They are going to relax their criteria and standards in terms of retrofitting buildings, solar panels, and bringing buildings up to energy code and making them more carbon neutral. They're already allowing for visible installations. That's one of their guidelines. Community boards moving forward, once LPC votes on it and it becomes the new code and standard for their documents, we will not be hearing them. And again, I just want to bring everyone back. These are zoning text amendments. Zoning text amendments affect the entire city, whether it's a landmark district, whether it's an upzone district, it's a zoning text, so it becomes law.
Okay, so Julia, what you're saying is then what the landmark is proposing is separate from this presentation that the mayor.
What Landmarks is proposing aligns with this to make it easier for property owners in the landmark district to actually accommodate and adhere to these zoning text changes should they be approved and created and brought into city law.
So the landmarks plan is dependent on this city's plan, or
Landmarks plan is not dependent on carbon neutrality. That is already going to happen. Whether these 17 proposals pass, LPC has already said we are relaxing our requirements in the landmark district, and we are not going to disallow property owners to bring their buildings into more greener ways to help combat climate change, and they're just allowing them to be more environmentally friendly.
very good. So that means as me as a landmark owner needs to wait until they approve it so I can have more of a panels on my roof so I can
The City of Yes carbon neutrality on flat roofs is allowing up to 100% coverage on flat roofs. Like, we need to go through these 17 proposals. It's a zoning text. I hate to keep beating a dead horse to remind the committee of that, but I know the land use committee There's
Someone,
someone
can
playing
someone
a game
mute
and it's
themselves?
driving me mad right now. But I just want to bring the committee back at 7 o'clock. We have not looked at a single individual proposal yet. And there are some major changes that will be coming to the city. And it's imperative that as a committee, we look through this and find some of the concerns. Ms. Gray has already raised a few. Dr. Lazar has raised a few. Mr. Vacconi has raised a few. Let's get into it and let's understand why these are the concerns.
Okay.
I
So
agree with you.
a couple of things. Mr. Callahan, can you just be ready to put up slide 32? Because it sort of addresses some of the problems that we're having with mechanicals above the roof. And so we can actually see something in a landmark district. And I don't know, Ms. Gray, have you raised your hand again? Okay, thank you. I don't know if it's Jack or Nicole because I see I like the JL now, who has raised their hand. And if it is either one of you, you may speak at this juncture.
Hey guys, I was wondering if maybe a different tact might benefit the community more. That saying that every building 9 floors or over needs to have solar on the roof. Because like when you put solar on a 3-story building, it doesn't really do that much. But all the new stuff that's going up, it seems like a really good idea that would be there.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Robinson. And so let's as we are approaching 7 o'clock, and this does not have to be a multi-hour meeting. We can have a little bleed, but so I'm going to review the goals, and then we're going to go through the proposals so we can identify them because we are having a conversation. We are. I'm just teeing at one of the comments in the chat. And I agree with you with that, Mr. Vacconi, that we look at the proposals. Okay, so the goals are to decarbonate our energy grid, which means that we, have less reliance upon gas and oil. We decarbonize our building stock so that we allow for retrofitting use of solar and renewable energy. Goal
Chairperson
3.
Weatherburn, please give me one moment. I must mute all because this
Thank
video game player is gonna make me lose my mind in a second.
Okay.
And now you may proceed, Ms. Wedderburn. Please unmute yourself and continue.
Thank you, Julia. I can see you were not a fan of pinball as a child. So the 4 goals that are outlined at the beginning of this presentation are to decarbonize our energy grid, which means we have less reliance upon gas and oil, to decarbonize our building stock, allowing for ways that we can retrofit buildings so that the zoning does not impair a building owner's opportunity to do such. 3, decarbonize our vehicles so that individuals will choose more environmentally sensitive vehicles, being able to have the choice of electricity rather than using oil. I should say gas and or hybrid because there's a greater availability for charging, and decarbonize our waste stream. So, so there's more composting and rainwater collection. Mr. Todd says all of those in the chat. The chat is actually very interesting. It's hot and popping. Hold on one second. So does anyone have any questions about their those goals, or would they like to look at different examples? Okay, so something that we've circled around a bit is solar on the roof, because as individuals, we are seeing that there are opportunities and challenges with flat roofs. So, the issue that we have with the zoning rules is that it curtails our ability for how much solar one can have on one's roof, depending on the kind of roof. So the proposal removes coverage and setback requirements for rooftops that use solar and apply a 15-foot maximum height limit to all flat roof solar installations regardless of district. So you can be in a much and in a district where the building height allowable is not particularly high, but in order to accommodate solar, that there is a 15-foot limit. Because as Mr. Callahan indicated, one of the challenges are the FDNY requirements, and that is not a small challenge to be able to have accessibility in the event of a fire. And I am sorry, I am limited to as what I can see because I am on my phone. Do we have any questions? Can you give me an audible questions or comments? Can you tell me, hi, this is so-and-so. Betty, I see your raised hand. Was it raised before and you haven't taken it down? Okay, I actually don't know that particular question. Jack or Nicole, can the answer to that particular question, can you ask that question rather than just limit it in the chat, please? So all are aware of it.
I haven't taken it down. I've got too many screens open on my phone. I apologize. Just ignore it. I apologize.
Should we let Betty go first?
No, she said she has too many screens that are open on her
Okay.
phone, so she apologizes. So Betty, if you need to jump in, you have to say, I need to jump in, okay?
Okay.
All
But I
right.
won't. I know nothing.
You know many things. That is not the case. Jack,
And a
go
great
ahead and
name
ask
as
that
well.
question. And then Gib.
I was wondering why there would be a setback restriction on a new building with solar. Like, you're not trying to hide something, you're trying to accentuate it, I think. Like, why hide the good thing? Why not put it out there? Like, why not make as much as you can? Thank you.
Jack, I don't know the answer, but I'm sure it has to do with aesthetics, particularly in a landmark district. Gib?
But what you're showing isn't a landmark district, it's a
It's as
9-story
an
building.
example. It's as an example. And the particular slide that I wanted to show was the one of the Madonna residence in Park Slope, and that's having accessories such as heat, air conditioning pumps that are clearly visible in a landmarked area, in a very scenic area, would give many an opportunity to pause about, aesthetics versus viability of solar. That's a good example. Mr. Vacconi?
I guess my question is, how will increasing the height of the solar canopy be factored into landmarks review? Right now, it's pretty easy. I mean, at least in our in the Prospect Heights Historic District, in general, it's pretty easy to get landmarks approval for putting solar on your roof. It's done at staff level, and it's pretty easy. But what will happen with? Are they talking about allowing a 15-foot canopy in in historic districts as well? Because right now it's effectively not generally possible to put any solar canopy on a roof if it would be visible from a public thoroughfare in a landmark district.
I would say I don't know the answer to that question, and I agree with you. It's fairly impossible now, so I don't know if there is. And this is because it's not my area of expertise, and I had a different expectation of this conversation, that it would be a presentation, because individuals who are not steeped in what all of this means should not be presenting ideas, because it's mostly conjecture. As they would say in church, lean not on your own understanding. You need to have someone explain things to you.
Well,
So
I see Julia is typing in the chat that LPC will allow it and review it at staff level. I guess my question again is, are they going to approve canopy installations now that are visible from a public thoroughfare?
Yes, that's what they're going to do. If my memory is serving me well, it was a Friday 3:30 meeting, and I was a bit checked out because it was right after the board meeting. But they will allow for visibility up to, I want to say, 25% on solar panels, mechanicals, anything that would allow an existing landmark building to retrofit. and also bring them into current energy requirements.
Wow,
Will
that's a
allow for
big
visibility.
deal. I mean,
It,
I
it
certainly
absolutely is.
I would have done my solar a lot differently if those rules had been in effect.
I think a lot of people would have as well, including Ms. Tyus and several other members that have property in landmarks districts. But they are trying to make it a lot easier for homeowners like yourself and Ms. Tyus and Mr. Thurton and several others. Everyone recognizes the urgency at this time. And, like this carbon neutrality city of yes, it's not just with Mayor Adams. This actually goes back to former Mayor de Blasio's first year. He had New York 2050. And so because climate change has not been, metering down any, and since we are not hitting our goals, it got pushed back to 2040. We have to do something now. And that's why these 17 different zoning text proposals and all the city agencies are looking into how they can make it easier for people to try to be more environmentally conscious.
Thank you, Julia. There is great.
I am an environmental nerd, so I am struggling really hard not to engage in this conversation as much as I want to.
You are absolutely engaged. So, and I actually thank you for your information regarding that, because this is something that I am not well steeped in, and I would have to rely upon my other committee members for knowledge with this. Are there any particular concerns regarding types of roofs, setbacks? Is that something that you would like to discuss? If you look in your presentation that everyone received or had the opportunity to review, you'll see that the solar on building rooftops flat is in great detail, as well as this setback requirements. Mr. Callahan, can you bring up slides 16 and 17? Ethel and Gib, I would also have to ask you, are your hands still raised, or do you have additional comments to be made?
Have additional comments?
Go ahead, Ms. Tyus.
Thank you. What LPC is relaxing addresses the broadening acceptance of people moving their heating systems, home and water heating systems, and their cooking and laundry, drying to electric. So that means more panels, and hence LPC is sensitive and willing to accept visibility of the panels on the rooftop from a public way, because you're going to have more panels to have an electric stove, an electric clothes dryer, et cetera, ad nauseum. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tyus. Thank you, Mr. Callahan, for putting up that slide. Overall, are there any more questions in regards to proposal 1?
Madam Chair, I would only add that the buyer beware. The manufacturing techniques are improving dramatically. So the type of panel that you buy should be closely inspected for longevity and warranty.
Sorry, this is Sarah Lazar again. I have a question. I guess maybe for the landmarks, veterans on the committee, do you foresee that the ability to put solar panels that are visible is going to affect the defendability of the historic districts and the landmarks, etc.? Like, do you worry at all that, if let's say solar panels are allowed to be put up that are visible, that LPC might start saying, well, sure, this person wants to put up, I don't know, like a some other type of rooftop, whatever, but how can we deny them if we're already allowing solar panels? I guess it's more of a question, just are you nervous about that? Just people who've been doing this historic district thing longer. Just a question.
Does anybody else want to answer that question before I weigh in?
I mean, this is Gib. I think it's a valid concern. I think that LPC has made it, in my view, they've made it pretty easy to put solar on your roof. It's easy to do a lot of mechanicals in a landmark district, but they generally can't be seen. They're not allowed to be seen from the primary facade. They have to be hidden from viewing from a public thoroughfare on the primary facade. If that's changing, that is kind of a big deal, and that will make historic districts feel different. And I mean, I guess it would go to whether or not, you're allowed to put other mechanical equipment 15 feet in the air. I doubt you would be. You're allowed to they're allowing you to put solar panels up there because they can generate more power with more coverage that way. But I don't think they'd let you put condensers for an air conditioner up there or, a cell repeater or something like that.
Correct. And also, yeah, I agree with you, Mr. Vicconi. And also, we have to take a look as to the applicability of general rules about landmarking, what one can have in the yard, what the facade looks like, repair as opposed to, install something new. And it would just make the conversation a lot more rich, more robust. And we would absolutely need some guidelines coming from either LPC itself or DOB to be able to have a level set to have our discussion. So a historic district, one of the things that you experience in a historic district is the look and feel of the streets. I mean, looking up and seeing a 15-foot, raised canopy for solar is definitely going to be jarring because that's something we haven't seen before. But is there a trade-off between, greater green efficiency and having, seeing something like that in historic district and maintaining all the other considerations in a historic district? So Sarah, when you ask about defensibility, what does that mean to you?
I mean, I guess I just mean that in the past, in land use meetings, there have been moments where some of the veterans on this committee, and by veterans, I mean just people who've been doing landmark stuff for a long time, have talked about, the idea of, oh, if we accept this proposal, this certificate of appropriateness, it kind of erodes the integrity of the districting, and it kind of sends a message to LPC that maybe we're okay with more and more exceptions being made. I don't know if this is just like a vibes question or maybe it's asking for too much speculation about the future, but just for people who've been involved in creating these historic districts and then also in sort of defending them, I guess it's just wondering, do you feel any concern about whether these changes are going to erode the historic districts that y'all have worked so hard to put together in the first place?
So what's happening is there's going to be an imposition of a new rule that applies to historic, will have particular applicability to the historic districts. So you have one standard as opposed to looking at different standards. So is it erosion? I would say it's an additional requirement that now has to be taken into consideration. But the appropriateness of the things that we have typically reviewed for landmarking, it doesn't change that.
I guess I would add that it's not a precedent in the case in like other things could be taken as precedent because it's a specific rule. It doesn't necessarily open up a path for somebody else to put something big visible from the from the public thoroughfare. Having said that, just from my personal experience as I own a historic building at a building in a historic district, and I was able to put enough solar panels on my roof to generate enough to generate all the electric power I need without having to go to a canopy. But I could have done more and probably put more on the grid. If not probably, I definitely could have, and I probably would have. But is that really like, I don't know. This is where you get into, are we trying to get as much mileage out of rooftops in New York City for solar power as we can, or are we just concerned with powering the buildings? You know.
And actually harken back to a query that Ms. Lazar made about apartment buildings and sharing any benefits by putting solar panels on apartment buildings, if there would be any benefit that would accrue to the individual apartment dweller.
Well, so the answer to that question could be yes, but the landlord is going to have to spend money to put the solar panels on the roof of its building. And so the landlord's going to want to recoup that money by charging for the electric power. I mean, the landlord's probably not going to be able to give the electric power away for free if it had to spend money to put the solar in.
Thank you, Gib.
Madam Chair, may I add to that? Block Power is a non-profit group that's been operating in Brooklyn for a minute, where you have apartment buildings in a square block area. And the proposal there is for everybody, well, the buildings in that square block area to make their own grid. Okay, so that needs to come to the fore, and people need to agree to do that. And the only way that the correct construct for the number of panels can be made is if Con Ed pieces together the historic usage for all of the account holders for Con Ed on that square block, all four sides, all the buildings on that four sides. And the landlord then has to figure out a way to charge back to those individuals the cost going forward. I'm not going to even try to deal with the original installation costs, but going forward, this needs to be looked at carefully and parceled out fairly. As Gib was saying, it can be done, but it requires some thought.
Thank you, Ms. Tyus. So guys, let's look at proposal 2, which are solar canopies over parking areas. And the steady state is that zoning allows accessory off-street parking spaces, open or enclosed, to obstruct the number of required open spaces, required front yards, required rear yards, etc., etc., etc. So the issue is solar awning canopies are not always permitted in the same areas as parking, preventing their installation. So the proposal would be to allow solar awnings and canopies to cover parking areas by adding them as permitted obstructions.
I vote yes.
So, we didn't even give a thumbs up or a thumbs to. Yes, this is very informal, as you can see. So you say yes, Ms. Tyus. What are we feeling about proposal 1? So we're just gonna go back a little bit. What do we think about proposal 1? Yes, no, or need more information?
I vote yes.
You're not the only voice in the room. Come on, everybody. This is supposed to be interactive.
So are we voting yes to have more panels put on the roof, or are we voting, what are we voting yes for?
That we would support the extended rules for putting solar on the roof.
Okay, I mean, I vote yes as long as it doesn't affect the facade of the buildings in the historic district. I'm okay.
Okay, that's a yes, but and I'm not taking a formal vote on this. It's just to get a sense of what we're saying, unless Ms. Neal tells me that we need to have a vote on each one of these items.
We absolutely do not need a vote on each of the individual 17. We are really just looking as a board to gather comments, feedback, concerns, any areas of it or issues that the committee finds that we can submit to the mayor.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Neal. And I think at each one of these, as we make comments, there are going to be questions. For example, and I'm going to be very tongue in cheek because we have some particular dense areas when it comes down to parking. So does that mean that if you allow for primary use with an allowed accessory use, that we now have dedicated charging and parking for residential owners within the district? He 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 he. Nobody understands that joke? Okay.
I
So
vote yes.
I don't agree with that. There are
well,
too
no,
many
I
people
I
who have
I I said I'm very tongue in cheek with that. Tee hee. And you would definitely have the War of the Roses around that issue. So it's just a little. It's like, well, I can have accessory use. A residential owner owns the dwelling, owns part of the sidewalk, even though it's under the jurisdiction of DOT or DOB. So that could be a nice little hassle. Anyways, I digress. So proposal 3 is about community solar and other renewable energy. So the zoning resolution currently classifies non-accessory solar generation as a commercial use. And the large parts of the city that are crucially needed to have grid supporting solar arrays. To locate here, solar and storage systems need to be kept small so that can be considered accessory, precluding grid supporting installations. So, do we classify this use as energy infrastructure equipment and permit installations of less than 10,000 square feet in residence districts as of right? What do you think about that?
I like it.
Why?
Because it provides more opportunities to use renewable energy sources.
I
So-
like the idea. I just don't think that we're ready for that. We have too many people who live in Crown Heights who drive combustible vehicles, and to take that away, we've already lost a number of parking spots due to the city bike thing. To mandate that we have designated parking for electric vehicles, I just think that's a little bit too much right now.
Okay, that's a good point. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I'm going to offer kind of I come to the same place, but from a different direction. I am supportive of electric charging stations on the street for bicycles, for e-bikes, but not for cars. I don't think we should be establishing curbside rights for drivers of electric vehicles in general, and drivers of electric cars. Bicycles, yes, cars, no.
Interesting. Interesting. Any other thoughts?
I agree with Jib on that. Um, it takes a lot of space, and there is a parking issue with us already. And like it was all the statements that was made before, we do have issues with how City Bike is placed in certain parts of Crown Heights and took up spaces where it could have been on the sidewalk, and so parking spaces wouldn't have been taken, things like that. For us to add spaces for electrical vehicles, that cuts even more space. And so there's a problem for people who need to park. And don't get me wrong, I understand that they, need to charge their vehicles, but there are more regular vehicles than the electric ones on the street. And it wouldn't be fair to give them a spot and then everybody else has to fight for what's left.
But can we recommend that we have the gas stations have 50%, charging stations and 50% on gas? They do that in Connecticut.
But that's not one of the proposals before us, Ms. Hutchison, for consideration. But that is a noteworthy idea.
This is Edward Dellman. I guess the only slight pushback I would give is to think about this proposal as trying to create the conditions for the city of tomorrow as opposed to what the city looks like now. Obviously right now, most of the cars that we are driving that are on the street are combustion engine cars, not electric cars. But the trend for the country and the city in general, yes, what Ms. Neal said. Exactly. Like we're heading pretty quickly towards a future where all cars in the city, or if not all, then most cars will be electric, and they'll need to be charged somewhere. And obviously, maybe some of them can be done at gas stations, whatever it is. Hopefully, the people who have private residences and driveways, which are very nice, can get charging stations attached to those. But for a lot of people, that might not necessarily work. And so we want to make sure that there are places for those cars to be charged and create infrastructure for that. And to answer Dr. Lazar's question, it depends on the charger and the car. I know that there are certain car companies, I believe Tesla might be one, that have sort of superchargers that can charge an electric vehicle within, I think, even like up to a full charge in less than an hour. I think maybe even like 15 minutes, something like that. But obviously it depends. It depends on the car and on the charger. I know it's pretty impressive. So anyway, that's all I would say. I would just say we should just try to think with the future in mind as opposed to how things are right now.
Thank you for that, Mr. Delman. So going back to proposal 3, it is to reclassify the use as energy infrastructure equipment and permit installations of less than 10,000 square feet in residential districts as of right. So that means this can be converted in a residential district, no questions asked. Is that something that we are in favor of, need more information, or are opposed to? And please give me color.
Madam Chair, this is Ethel Tias.
Yes, Ethel.
I suggest that we ask the feds to require vehicle manufacturers to make the roofs of the vehicles solar panels.
Oh, that's an interesting requirement. That's very interesting. I don't know how that would integrate with the technology and use and manufacture of vehicles by individual manufacturers, but that's very interesting.
Let's start with city buses, etc.
Well, city buses are already hybrid, and many vehicles are now electric.
No, I'm saying the roof will be a panel generating energy from the sun as it moves along.
Again, it depends on the manufacturer, but as I said before, very interesting. Ms. Davis, I see your hand up, but I know you have not voiced inclusion, so you're okay? Okay, so let's look at proposal number 4, because we have quite a few.
I'm okay, thank you.
You are welcome. So the energy storage systems. And Mr. Callahan, would you be so kind as to put up slide number 23? Right? What is energy storage? Battery-based ESS are available with many different chemistries. Examples are lead, LCO, LiFePOFO, LiFe, lithium, something else, potassium, something else. You can tell I wasn't a chemistry major. Battery-based systems are thoroughly reviewed, extremely safe, and are completely different from the systems found in common e-bike batteries. Each facility is essentially custom designed and installed by specially trained engineers and electricians. And that's a key point. All installations must use UL certified technologies pre-approved by FDNY. All installations must be reviewed on a site-specific basis by DOB. All installations are more than 250 kilowatts and classified as large systems, and also must be reviewed in parallel by DOB and FDNY. What do you think of this? Because it's really about the community solar and whether or not their uses are in the commercial and manufacturing districts. My question would be, is it applicable to all manufacturing districts? And all
I
commercial
think
districts.
to open the floor for this properly, you should that all seemed like a preamble, and it looks like the proposal is actually on the next page.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Okay, so the zoning resolution, it currently classifies non-accessory solar generation as a commercial use. The issue is large parts of the city are off limits to crucially needed grid supporting solar arrays. To locate here, solar and storage systems need to be kept small so that can be considered accessory, precluding grid supporting installations. And the proposal would be to reclassify this use as energy infrastructure equipment and permit installations of less than 10,000 square feet in residence districts as of right. So what are we talking about? Essentially, the districts that are largely absent of large apartment buildings, single family, two family, low rise dwellings, and coincidentally located in our transit deserts. So what do you think about the location as of right of all of this?
Hi, this is Gib. It's a little hard to consider this without also considering the fact that we have an open initiative that's going on 10 years now to try to get more manufacturing use into this district so we can employ more people with accessible jobs that don't require a college degree. And as much as I want to support solar and green infrastructure, if the economics of this was attractive enough to use, let's say, ground floor space in a mixed use building for solar, that might create some jobs, but I don't think it would create very many jobs in a place that's just storing power. And I'd want to just learn more about it. I'd want to learn about. I mean, if that's truly a job creating use, and a place like that would employ a lot of people who who could be from the community and could be trained into those jobs, I would be very supportive of it. But if it didn't offer that opportunity, I think I would be less supportive.
Thank you, Gib.
This is Sarah Lazar again. So I had brought this up before, and my apologies. Electricity is actually the part of physics class that I did the worst in high school. So a lot of this is over my head. But I was wondering. I know that Mr. Vicconi had made a comment about FDNY concerns about the safety of the batteries related to energy storage systems. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was wondering about in terms of how compatible this would be with M-Crown uses, et cetera, and whether it could fit into the use groups. It sounds like they're considering a special use group category. But I was also wondering, is this the kind of thing that could safely have housing on top of it in a, with the like mixed zoning category, or is that, I don't know, would there be a risk that people's building will explode while they're asleep? I simply don't know enough about these things.
Yeah, I think
But
that's a good question because today, DOB regulations, for instance, wouldn't allow. I wouldn't be allowed to install a battery complex in my basement to store the energy that comes from my solar panels. That's not permitted. So I'm wondering if that's changing and they're letting residential building owners put batteries in their in the same buildings they're living in, then I guess probably it would be allowed in any building. But
Madam Chair, Dr. Lazar, if I may, City Planning did publish a couple years ago a recommendation that solar storage batteries be allowed. They have to be at least 5 feet away from the building. And I understand that that is changing. Fire department still has serious reservations considering the combustibility, but city planning and the fire department are working closely to address that issue. And I am seeing publications from the various battery manufacturers that the city is close to allowing the solar energy batteries for residential use, not in a basement and not on the building. The last thing I read was at least 5 feet away from the building.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts or issues as we gather information to be able to, as a community board, to be able to respond to this? All right, hearing none, let's move to proposal 5, which is a new authorization for onshore wind. What do we think of that?
Where's it? Where's the planning on putting it? Like,
By the shore.
yeah, by what, the Belt Parkway, or that huge park that they just built?
Well, the city, it's something that's a citywide consideration. So in my opinion, they would be looking at what is suitable along the shoreline.
I'm
Is
I'm gonna
that
abstain
really,
on this one.
are we sure about that?
We're not.
This
That's why I qualified that.
this slide is showing the current regulations. What are proposed?
It's to create a new authorization that will allow the CPC to consider future applications for new height and setback relief to facilitate onshore wind.
Okay, so you need a special permit from the CPC.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be better if we knew what the guidelines were.
Yeah,
And
I would want more information on that before I vote on that.
Southwest toward
okay, someone is driving. Okay. All right, I'm taking notes. Sorry, guys. Okay. So, the next topics as we go through, so that was topic 5. Let's look at topic 6. And Ms. Neal, all of this is really applicable to housing. So, one of the big things, that comes before us, is, whether or not a building, what is the FAR on the building? So, the 6th topic is about how do we retrofit the mechanicals for a building. So, Mr. Callahan, I'm going to ask you to put up slides 30 and 31, and then we'll speak specifically to what they're asking about, right? In terms of what the steady state is and what the proposal is. And the infamous picture of the Madonna residence along Prospect Park West, and the high visibility of their mechanicals from anyone who is walking by. Okay, let's go. So currently zoning currently requires accessory mechanical equipment that is a permitted obstruction above zoning height and setback requirements to be screened. And the issue is that rooftop mechanical equipment that is not permitted obstruction because it is below the zoning height has no applicable requirement. And that's why we see all of those heat pumps and air conditioner units above the Madonna resident, because it's not above the zoning height limitation. So the proposal would be expanding the screening requirements to ensure better screening of permitted obstructions, as well as, for the first time ever, requiring other rooftop mechanical equipment which is not a permitted obstruction to be screened as well. What do we feel about that? Please speak.
I guess I could agree with that.
Okay.
What is Jolie's opinion on it? So she's the environmentalist. Like, what does she think about it? I'm curious.
State Park Road.
Or Julie.
Julia, you're specifically being called in.
I'm sorry, what was the question, please?
What do you think of this? Proposal 6, the retrofitting of mechanical equipment and screening.
Well, this was another one of the sorry, I need some water. That's why I said I needed to hear the question again. I was trying to get some. I didn't make it. This was another one of the proposals I had flagged as an area of concern for me. Are there going to be additional credits issued by the city and the state for buildings that need to retrofit their buildings? If all buildings need to be retrofitted by 2040, they need to be upgraded.
Oh, honey, you're at proposal 7, not proposal 6, which requires the screening of mechanicals on the roof.
Okay, so let me pull this up on my screen so I can see it. I'm sorry, I'm all the way down at the end. I'm in the transportation setting. So we are at slide, what did you say, 31 and 32?
We're actually 30, well, we're at 31.
Okay, so reading really quickly, and I mean, I'm not really supposed to be giving my thoughts and input on this, but since you asked me, see.
So I won't put you in any kind of jeopardy. Think about it. Do you really want to see these ugly things so prominent, or do you want to now have a requirement that they screen? Because the reason why they're not screened on top of what used to be known as the Madonna residence is there's no requirement because they're beneath the height level. So now if you're beneath the height level, they're going to require that you screen.
So
What does screening mean?
as
I'm
soon as I
sorry.
saw this image, I was like, oh my God, I know where that building is. That's right along Lake Eastern Parkway by Union Street, right outside of Grand Army Plaza. And yes, I think they're ugly. And this is my personal opinion. In no way is it a reflection of the board, but at the same time, I do understand the need for these things. But I do feel as though there should be a way and an accommodation made. But, if the load-bearing walls are toward the facade of the building, what then would be the requirement that the city has to tell a property owner, we want you to incur X, Y, and Z amount of additional costs to retrofit your building? What is the city or our electeds going to do? Are our agencies going to do that will help these property owners recoup or overcome the initial upfront costs of being able to make us as residents, as people passing by, look up at these buildings without the necessary revolting disgust that many of us have seeing some of these things? If there's nothing in place, that's the concern I have. If there's nothing in place, then we're going to see more of these things. But what can the city do? And that's, I hate to do it again, but I'm going to bring the committee back. This is the feedback. This is the feedback, the board needs to put together a document outside of my own personal opinions.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I agree with everything you said. They are ugly to look at, but to retrofit a building requires money.
Well,
and
this
the
is
city
not
gonna offer?
Absolutely. And as you know, that's one of my primary concerns. Dr. Lazar asked me what my concerns are with the ESSs, and my concerns with them are like, you're in a residential space. Residential buildings have way less fire retardant materials than say a commercial space or a manufacturing space. And we've seen what batteries can do. Last year, there was a horrific fire in Bed-Stuy that took out not one, but two properties adjacent to each other because a charging battery exploded. Now, I know what the document is saying. It's not going, and I know what Mr. Vacconi said. It's not going to be like an electric bike's battery, but it might not be that, but it's going to be bigger. So that's my concern with that. And as I said, as district office staff, it's not my place to be on these meetings sharing my own personal opinions and concerns. But since I was directly asked, those are some of my concerns. I've left a lot of them out. I really do want the committee to get back to the task and reviewing the
Thank you.
the proposal.
Thank you for that, because it's only to provide background so that the board and the office
Yeah.
will be able to respond appropriately. So
Um,
proposal 7 is actually talking about retrofits to meet code. And Mr. Callahan, would you be so kind as to put up slide 33?
Madam Chair, this is Ethel Tias. If we could just refer back to the prior slide. There's nothing stopping owners from putting up a decorative artistic screen around mechanical equipment. New buildings are adding their mechanicals as an interior floor where the zoning permits. So we need to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tyus.
Just following up, sorry, this is Sarah Lazar again. I I feel like this is a dumb question, but does electrification always mean more things are going on top of a building, or can some of it stay in the basement or go in the basement? I just am not familiar with how electrification works. Sorry.
Sarah, it's not a matter of electrification per se. It's a matter of using solar in a new way. So it's sort of a separate issue. And it really depends upon the kind of building and within what district it lies in, what kind of zoning district it lies within, because there are uses that are applicable to that.
Oh, okay, because I understand why solar panels need to be above, because that's where the sun is. But I I didn't
No,
understand if
this,
maybe
in the,
electrification in general meant other kinds of equipment needing to go up there.
no, I mean, you're talking about accessory uses. So, for example, air conditioning pumps and those such things, or which are what you see above the former Madonna residence. So, God, I don't want us to be forever and 6 days. So, I know we need to be able to have a discussion. So, I'm going to move this along and move to proposal 7, please. So, proposal 7 is going to it's allowing envelope retrofits to meet code. And steady state is zoning considers wall thickness as floor area. This counts against your FAR or the amount that you are allowed to build. The issue is when trying to completely replace a thin 4-foot facade and a thicker 11-inch facade, those additional 7 inches count as new floor area and are not allowed to be added. This makes this facade replacement project impossible. The proposal is to ensure that a recladding is allowed to create a new allowance for additional wall thickness, providing the new wall complies with the latest thermal barrier requirements in the New York City Energy Code. Any comments,
This is
thoughts?
just for retrofits?
Just for retrofits.
Okay.
Because it'll allow it to meet the building code.
My thoughts is that we're living in a city with 1700 and 1800 built buildings for the most part. There's some things that even though we may not want to see it, we're going to have to do a give and take to get these older buildings retrofitted because that's where we are.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Ms. Gray. Any other questions? You know what? This is such a talkative group. I'm surprised that you guys are so silent. And I'm just going to ask a question. Ms. Drummond, are you with Hester Street by any chance? Or are you a community resident?
I'm a resident.
No, thank you, Ms. Drummond. You are a name that was unfamiliar to me, and I was
Oh,
expecting a presenter, so forgive me.
oh
And
no, that's okay. I'm a resident.
okay, so any other thoughts about allowing retrofits to meet code? Okay, let's move along to proposal 8. Promoting buildings that perform better than code. Ooh, right? So, hold on, let me just get to the rationale. So, the steady state is zoning allows a wall thickness floor area extension, the zone green bonus for portions of walls that exceed energy code. The issues current exemption focuses on the heat transmission factor, U factor of a wall. This misses other key criteria such as air leakage. code's U factor has been heavily revised since zone green. It is very difficult to outperform today's U factor and nearly impossible to outperform future U factors. Administering this up to 8-inch wall exemption is complex and prone to issues. It is impractical for existing buildings to take advantage of this exemption. So the proposal is to simplify the deduction from up to 8 inches beyond the first 8 inches of wall thickness with a flat 5% exemption from total FAR, floor area ratio. Align the exemption with Local Law 97 by promoting newer performance criteria. Bullet point 1, existing buildings which retrofit to become fully electrified buildings would be eligible for the exemption. Bullet point 2, new buildings which are already required to be fully electric, Local Law 154, would be eligible for the exemption if they design to ultra low energy usage building design standards. What do you guys think? I should say, what does the assembled body think instead of you guys?
I think it's fine. I think it's fine.
So what, I mean, I can sort of work this out, but like, does this scale in such a way that a 5% exemption doesn't better benefit a taller building in the amount of FAR that's exempted? Does it scale linearly or exponentially?
It does not specifically say. And Gib, can you weigh in about FAR? Is that vertical or is that horizontal? How or is that something? How does it fit within the envelope? Is that kind of query? Okay. Have we lost Mr. Viconi? All right.
Madam Chair,
Just
I
step
would
away for a second.
suggest that a flat FAR exemption from total FAR for a start is an incentive for better performance for new buildings. And I think that after a few years, the city will revisit it. If it's not as effective as it could have been for a larger percentage exemption.
Okay. I would agree with you, Ms. Tice. Mr. Callahan, does that answer your question or is this something where we need more information?
I mean, just to sort of restate it, I mean, if you have 8-inch, I'm just trying to understand whether we're going from one linear measure to another linear measure, and there isn't some sort of like sneaky exemption or a sneaky incentive for to build a taller building because you get some sort of additional bonus from a 5% exemption over an 8-inch exemption.
So my response was, I don't think so, but as we all know, the devil is in the details. So I would ask for more information to be able to discuss that.
Actually, the key question here is whether there's also a height bonus as well as a FAR bonus. If it's just a FAR bonus, it's not so bad, but if it's a height bonus, it's different.
Okay. So we would support this if it is only limited to a FAR bonus?
I mean, I would agree with Mr. Viconi on that.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I did not expect this to be as to follow along these lines. So we are now in the transportation section since we've been talking about e-vehicles, which would bring us to proposal 9, open to the public EV charging facilities. I'll just read the steady state, the issue and the proposal, and then we can review slide 41 if you please, or if we don't please, but that's what we're going to do right now. So open to the public EV charging facilities. Currently, zoning considers open to the public EV charging facilities as use group 7. As use group 7 commercial use. Issue, these facilities aren't allowed in many commercial districts commonly mapped closest to where people live. Proposal, reclassify these facilities as use group 6 uses that are permitted in all commercial districts, more than doubling the commercial land area available for e-charging facilities. What do you think?
So are they looking at public land or private land to do this? Because like as I stated before, why can't we use the gas station as charging station instead of taking up private property to do that? Or even the sidewalk?
It is not clear as to who this would be applicable to, just in terms of the zoning, just commercial and commercial properties are oftentimes privately owned. Good question, Ms. Hutchinson. Any other queries?
I agree with Ms. Hutchinson. This is Ethel Tyus speaking. Again, we need to push the vehicle manufacturers to make the roofs of the vehicles equal to solar panels.
But I do feel like in response to that, that the idea of sort of making this ubiquitous so that it's not like we think of it now, where there's one station outside the Brooklyn Children's Museum that that the entire neighborhood fights over, but sort of that every parking space is an electric vehicle charging space within reason should be the kind of the conceptual way that you're thinking about this. If we're going to electrify every car in the next 15 years, you'll need charging stations that just flat out will not fit at a gas station. So I mean, I would be in favor.
But they have charging stations in Connecticut next to gas stations. So I don't think that that's not realistic. I think it's unrealistic to have charging stations on the sidewalk taking up additional parking. Like not everyone is gonna own an electric vehicle. People are still gonna drive their combustible vehicles. So I do understand your point. I just don't think it's fair to the community as a whole.
Well, I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would imagine that like the current charging stations, it's going to be not parking spaces that are taken up, but sidewalk space that is taken up by charging stations that are in the grid. So it's not as if combustible vehicles are exempted. It's just that there's an incentive for an electric vehicle to park in a space.
Madam Chair, I would offer to Mr. Callahan and Ms. Hutchinson that people who can will put their charging station in their yard. And just like they use a water hose to water the tree well near their property, they'll use their charging station in their yard to charge their car. But again, I don't know if I've said this 4 or 5 times now, we need to push the vehicle manufacturers, every kind, to make the roofs of the vehicles solar panels. Thank you.
I agree with Ethel regarding reaching out to the manufacturers, but I disagree with people expecting the space to be in front of their house. I get, like, if you have a 2-family home and you're the owner, you can install a charging station to charge your vehicle. However, if you have a tenant or someone else who owns a vehicle and or someone on the block choose to park in front of your house, you can't tell them that they can't park there because you want to charge your car.
I think we're getting into the weeds with this a little bit. I mean, it's just, what is the applicability? And if we're offering this as a public, if it's a public thing, that, you can have the charging stations, then, that speaks differently than someone putting, as Ms. Ty said, a charging station in their yard for their own use. So that's a whole different set of questions. I think that's too much of a nitty gritty overall. How do we facilitate the charging of electric vehicles? Mr. Vicconi?
Hi, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. It's true that on 95, there are rest stops that have Tesla stations, but they're in parking spaces. They're not, it's very different than a gas pump. It takes a lot longer to charge a car than it does to fill a tank. So I don't see gas stations in New York City, which already operate kind of on a shoestring, dedicating space for electric charging in the same way that you see them at rest stops on the highway. I
But
also,
we can,
I want
we
to,
can,
if I could just
Just
finish.
Mr. Riccone finish, Ms. Hutchison, please.
If I would also like to very, very strongly disagree with the idea that we should be putting in electric vehicle charging on this, on the curb space with the intention of having cars charge at the curb with electric stations. I don't think over the long term, we should be reinforcing the idea that people have a right to put cars at the curb. I may very well be in the minority in this group on that point, but the fact is we should be encouraging transit in New York City. We should be encouraging bicycling. We should not be encouraging ownership of cars, whether they're gas-powered cars or electric-powered cars. And I would absolutely oppose the idea of trying to create a right for people to have curb space with an electric car.
I can
I
agree with
agree with
Gary.
you on that. I agree with you on that. I don't agree with everyone taking, being expected to to ride a bike. We have people who have families of 4. Putting them on a bicycle to buy groceries is just not a realistic expectation. But I agree with everything else you said.
I'm not making the point that everyone has to be forced to ride a bicycle. I'm simply saying that we should not be creating the perception there's a right for an owner of a vehicle to get a spot at the curb.
Completely agree. I completely agree with that.
Hi.
Ms. Lazar, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. From the picture, maybe I'm just misunderstanding this. From the picture, it kind of looks like the open to the public EV charging facilities are like, are we talking about like parcels of land that are used for this purpose, or are we only talking about curbside? Because, if public land is going, I would not like for public land to be used for car charging exactly when there are lots of other things like where, I want more parks, I would want like low income housing, etc. Like if there's any public land, I wouldn't want it to be used for this because again, encouraging more individual private vehicle use. I'm
So,
not
Sarah,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I am cutting you off. Remember, it's commercial and manufacturing district, so it's talking about housing and other uses are pretty much excluded from this. So, Franklin Avenue, Utica Avenue, as Ms. George, excuse me, as Ms. Neal has suggested in the chat. May we move on to proposal 10? Hearing no objections. So proposal 10 is expanding car charging, public EV charger sharing. Currently, zoning generally requires parking spaces serving uses such as retail stores or apartment buildings. Accessory charging is permitted in all of these spaces. Some of these spaces are permitted to be occupied by commercial car share program vehicles. The issue is that EV chargers installed in accessory spaces are not available to the public per zoning rules. And the proposal would be expand existing car share rules to allow property owners to designate up to 20% of their spaces or 5, whichever is greater, for flexible public EV charger sharing or car sharing or any combination thereof. So what do we think?
Yes.
This
You
one
are
I can.
pulling a Mr. Staten, Ms. Tyus. Okay, tell me who you are and let's weigh in on your considerations, please. Gib, is that your hand waving?
Well, I put my hand up, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say that this one I support. There are a lot of buildings that have excess parking spaces in them in New York City because of the parking minimums that were required under zoning in the building code. And those buildings could take their, parking minimums, I also oppose parking minimums, but they're out there. And so it required a lot of developers to build excess parking spaces. And I think turning those excess parking spaces into charging stations is a good use for them.
Thank you for that, Mr. Vacconi. Bay, I did not hear you, so I'm going to presume you have nothing to say at this juncture.
I
Anyone?
would like to see parking lines for cars that don't that have either one. Otherwise, some places they have lines, and that would stop people from using 3 spaces for one car because they don't want to see their new car get a nick or something. I would love to see parking lines, you know, to regulate what the parking spaces are throughout the city. But that's a conversation for another time. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
I don't have
Okay.
anything to plug in.
Anyone have anything to say regarding 10?
I'm having a trouble raising my hand with sharing. I'm kind of baffled as to who. I really, this is an open question. Who is this for? Because I mean, it seems great, but I'm trying to understand what is the reality of a parking lot that is not accessible to the public that will somehow be in some sort of like metered or a controllable way suddenly accessible to the public for charging stations.
So
Maybe cab drivers?
No. So what it is expanding existing car share rules to allow property owners to designate up to 20% of their spaces or 5, whichever is greater. So do you have charging or do you have parking for rideshare vehicles? And I would think it looks like it would allow a way for there to be more rideshare vehicles to have spaces by which they could charge and people could take out those cars. Because right now, if you go into Park Slope, you know, they're designated parking spaces for rideshare vehicles, right? And those rideshare vehicles may not have the accessibility or often do not have the accessibility to charging. So it's a sort of a flexible way by saying you can have more people accessible for charging, or you can put in rideshare vehicles, which of course benefits a private owner, the rideshare companies. Or
Yes,
say private
I guess if we're expanding the rules, the point is that there's got to be. I mean, like parking is such a I have to imagine such a lucrative business where it's at a premium. So I guess is the fact that you're liberalizing the ability to put in more zip cars the like monetary incentive for someone to switch to an EV charging station.
Yes.
That's okay. Got it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. And Mr. Callahan, if you need to offer your opinion because you are so helping us out by ride sharing, please just vocalize that your desire. All right, guys, we are now up to proposal 11, flex parking, commercial vehicles in non-residential districts. So currently, zoning separately regulates the use of parking spaces for 1, car sharing services, 2, car rental services, and 3, commercial vehicle storage. The issue is that these rules are very confusing and limited. They should be expanded to promote car rental sharing services as an alternative to personal car ownership and provide more locations for overnight truck parking and charging. Right? So we're putting everything together. So the proposal, hold on one second. Sorry, as I flip through my pages, it's very, very, very detailed. But what do you think about that? Allowing flexible parking within the same area, essentially. No comments. Okay. Wait, hold on. Written comments. Someone put something in the chat. Can you please read this?
I mean, I would support this as well. I think making more capacity for car share, for rental cars, and for charging EV vehicles. I don't know about the commercial vehicles, but that's probably okay too. But I think allowing more spaces for those things rather than to park private combustion engine vehicles is good.
Okay.
I would go for more than 20% of the accessory spaces, quite frankly.
I agree.
Yeah, I would just want more information about why they've stuck commercial vehicles in here. Because everything else seems to make sense, but then there's this one sticks out.
Well,
Yes,
the commercial vehicle is something that's used, you know, I mean, it's delivering stuff. It's carrying stuff around. It's not a personal car. So you can't replace the commercial vehicle with transit or a bicycle, let's say. Well, some people might take issue and say that you can replace it with a cargo bike, but not if you're delivering a refrigerator.
Thank you.
So let me give another example. What you're seeing is there are fewer opportunities for operators of school buses to have parking. And what you now see is you see them parking on streets, you know, which greatly reduces the opportunity for cars to park on the street. So it's giving flexibility and voice to the fact that now that the yellow school bus operators are having difficulty parking during the day.
So is this designated parking that's going to be put on a public street, or is it going to be put in a designated area?
Where there is parking, there will be an opportunity to mix the kinds of vehicles that are allowed to be parked. So you can have rideshare, you can have car rental, and you can have commercial vehicles.
But I just want to, just to clarify, the words accessory spaces here mean that these are off-street parking. They're accessory spaces is in a parking lot or a garage or something like that. It's not on the street.
Thank you,
Oh, I'm for it then. I'm good. I agree.
All right, so proposal 12, expansion of automated parking regulations, steady state in limited areas. The zoning requirement provides special allowances to automated parking facilities that are tailored to their unique operational needs versus a typical parking facility. For example, the minimum size requirements for a parking space are reduced to reflect the unique tray and rack system to store cars. The issue is these allowances don't apply outside of Manhattan core and a few other areas, limiting the feasibility of such. So think about parking at the Edison lot at the corner of Livingston, at Livingston, on Livingston Street, downtown Brooklyn. Such as that. So what are your thoughts about this? Because the proposal is to support the growth of automated facilities. This proposal would proactively expand the allowance and associated tower maneuvering requirements due to their efficiency on a citywide basis.
Madam Chair, this is Ethel Tias. I think it's workable if the pricing, the fees are closely controlled.
Thank you. Anyone else? So I would also say that, going towards such automation, of course, reduces the opportunity for people to have regular jobs that can pay a decent amount of salary, a decent amount of income, given the companies that they work for. Because some large purveyors of parking spaces, such as Edison, are known to pay people a decent wage. A decent, and what used to be considered a blue collar wage, and we're excluding plumbers and the like, because we know plumbers and electricians, because we know they come at a premium at all times. Okay, so anyone else with any thoughts? I just want to say one of the reasons why this is so tedious tonight is because, and I'm going to use the word tedious, is that we had not reviewed this and dove into what we were thinking, so we couldn't be like firecrackers getting ready to answer the questions and ready with our answers. So for that, just enjoy the pain for a little bit longer. We've got 4 more to go. So proposal 13, bicycle and e-mobility and charging uses. Currently, zoning provides use regulations for automobile parking and charging. The issue is zoning doesn't provide any similar regulations for bicycles and other e-mobility. This creates regulatory uncertainty around where bike micromobility parking facilities are permitted. And this proposal will create a new commercial use for public bicycle and micromobility parking. New rules would also provide for secure outdoor bike storage, lockers as permitted obstructions in yards and open spaces.
Madam Chair, I support this, but I recommend that we all keep an eye on what Lyft and Uber, or especially Lyft, get from the reduction in the use of private cars. People will be driven to pay Lyft as the number of cars is reduced. And a lot of people just don't use bicycles, especially older folks. So keep that in mind. With that in mind, I support this.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Ethel.
I support this too, but I don't understand the text that says zoning provides use regulations for automobile parking and charging, but doesn't provide similar regulations for bicycles. But there are regulations now that require indoor bicycle parking for buildings over a certain size. So I don't fully understand the slide. But I do think that I'm not really sure what this is proposing to do. Create a new commercial use for public bicycle and micromobility parking, and provide for secure indoor bike storage lockers as permitted obstruction outdoor. And I mean, this all sounds fine, but the I don't really know what this does.
This is a city bike share corral on every block.
No, that's not.
Well, no. But here's the thing.
That's not what this is. This is for your personal bicycle to be able to put it in a secure, locked place. This is kind of like Uni. Is anyone else familiar with Uni?
Mr. Verconi, can I just interject for a moment? And also Chairperson Weatherburn, I do apologize, but if the committee can just think back a couple months ago to 910 St. John's Place, the LPC.
Julia, that's exactly what I was going to.
It was for a bike shed in their front yard. And
in the historic district.
Thank you, Ms. Wedderburn.
Oh, then no, I won't agree with that. I don't think that we need bike sheds on the corner.
And I'm enthusiastically
It's not in the corner. It's inside of private property. It's like in a yard, like a garbage can shed, like an enclosed space for your garbage cans. But instead of that, it's for bicycles and e-mobility devices.
Right, Julia is right. It would apply to something in an areaway of a house in a historic district, but it would also apply to something like an Unipod, like the one that's like down by Barclays Center at Atlantic Center.
Oh.
It would presumably apply to either one. It's not something, it doesn't sound like it's part of this proposal, but for instance, one of the things that's not permitted right now is to put an Unipod in a parking space. We had one as a prototype on Vanderbilt Avenue last year, and it was really popular. A lot of people used it. And even the people who lived in the building opposite the Unipod liked it because it has landscaping and greenery on the top and the like. So one thing that would be useful to add to this, in my view, is an update to the DOT regulations that would actually allow secure bike parking in the parking lane. Again, I realize everybody might not share that opinion.
I actually didn't read it that way, and again, I do apologize, as I know I'm not supposed to be interjecting so much. A parking lane is not necessarily considered an open space. A greenway would be considered an open space. A parks department triangle, like Lowry or 6th Avenue triangle, would be considered an open space. And so while I do recognize your concern with having more of the pods like around Barclays, that thing is monstrous, it's huge, it's unsightly. I understand the concerns around some of them, but for this, I think, and it's my personal opinion, I think it's just to ease and relax the requirements for having in a private property front yard this type of storage space for a bike. And that's specifically why I referenced 910 St. John's Place.
Yeah, no, I see that. But what I was proposing was that this proposal be extended to allow for stuff like Unipods in a parking lane.
Then that is a perfect suggestion, and I will add it to my notes for what we need to send to the mayor's office.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was thinking back to that discussion about that bike shed from a and I guess, I voted, I thought that bike shed, I had the concerns about the historic preservation factor. And, Mr. Vicconi's idea about putting it in a parking spot, the Unipod, um, that could be workable. I guess my concern is about um, putting anything that would devote more sidewalk space to Unipods, et cetera, because it can be difficult for just pedestrian mobility, and there's just a lot about Brooklyn is very difficult for wheelchair users, or people who need to use crutches, or who have just walking difficulties. And okay, the Unipod, yeah, our sidewalks are just not big enough for something like that. I don't know. I guess I don't really like the Unipods. I mean, bicycles themselves are beautiful to look at, and so I don't mind seeing them tacked onto every railing or fence or whatever. I mean, I understand people want to protect their bicycles, but yeah. Anyway, I think protecting our sidewalk space is important for people with mobility issues.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I
That's
agree.
a great.
I agree. I like the idea of the bike storage, but I like it better if it's like indoors in a garage, out of sight. It's probably going to be a lot safer than putting it out on a public street.
And this is Nix, and I'm sorry I was so quiet all evening. It's so many new subjects, but going back to how we're trying to reduce cars in New York City, that means we will need more bikes. Therefore, we will need more bicycle storage. So I think we need to broaden our thoughts a little bit, like even also to the landmark district, to have like possibly like little bike stations there off the sidewalk. I agree with Ms. Lazar, and I agree with Ms. Hutchinson. I just also want to point out, as we put in the chat, like e-bikes lately have also caused fires due to their batteries, that we please should take that into account as well when it comes to like safe bicycle and e-mobility storage, to just make sure that whatever the decision shall be, to keep the fire hazard in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nix. Are we ready to move on to proposal 14, which means we still have 15, 16, and 17 before we're done? 14? Okay, so we're going
Madam Chair, I'd just like to remark that we went through a lot this evening. We didn't have the time. We haven't taken the time to vote on each one of these proposals. So I hope the write-up that goes to city planning and to the full board as a result of this discussion is clear on who said what and how many people said what in response to each proposal.
you know what, Ms. Tyus, and we're very specific things. And if you look at minutes and notes in general, it's not specific as to who said what, but under the proposals, it would be, these are some of the issues that arose for the consideration, because what we're doing here is collecting information by which the board office would have more teeth, or more of a, I feel they think. Land use expressed this during their meeting gives a much better opportunity and foundation for providing feedback to the for the City of Yes initiative. Okay? So we're moving to proposal 14, expanding the use of permeable paving. Currently, zoning is supposed to allow paving area to be paved with permeable paving. The issue is the text as drafted requires the Department of Buildings to investigate each proposed installation to deem it appropriate. Ambiguity about how to do has complicated the process of using permeable paving in New York City. The proposal would be revise the language to make it clear that permeable paving is always allowed. Any thoughts on this?
I support it.
Any other thoughts beyond supporting? What does this mean in terms of high performance street beds?
I guess I would, is it just that the original language didn't consider that permeable paving can reach sort of like a critical mass of quality? And that's why you needed it on a case by case basis? Like,
Correct.
and so the assumption is that permeable paving within I guess is there some sort of bounds as to what the definition of permeable paving materials are? Or is that open to the interpretation of the installer?
So here's the thing, I don't know that, so that's information we can go back and say we need more information of exactly what is permeable paving. I'm sure there are people that have that expertise, but as the body assembled, I don't think we have that expertise among us, of those around the table, the virtual table, so to speak.
It's highly likely that it has a shorter longevity. So, but we have to choose between that and other issues regarding climate change.
Okay. Thank you for that point, Ms. Tyers. You as well, Mr. Callahan. It's like, what is the problem here? Why don't we have this as a regular consideration? Okay, moving on to proposal 15. Allow for high performance street beds. Currently zoning requires street trees to be installed alongside new developments and enlargements. The issue, as drafted, the zoning text precludes the use of newer, more inventive prototypes such as connected tree beds and rain gardens that have been designed and approved by DOT. The proposal would add flexibility to the street tree requirements to allow locations of required trees within connected tree beds or rain gardens, as well as substitution of one required street tree with a DEP compliant rain garden. Any thoughts? All right, so I'll just
I vote yes.
So here's the thing. When you think about the parts of the district where we have a higher likelihood of flooding, having the rain gardens allows for water drainage into the sewage system in a more efficient way and not over flooding, so that we have something that is decorative and something that provides a useful a use such that we don't have to overload our existing sewage and waste disposal systems vis-a-vis rainwater.
My comment on this one, this is Gibb. My comment on this is that I support rain gardens. We have a lot of them in Prospect Heights. One of the persistent issues with rain gardens is maintenance.
Yep.
They present a totally different set of maintenance problems than tree pits. And although the city says that they come out and maintain rain gardens, if you walk around, you'll see a lot of rain gardens that are full of trash, and the plants are in a poor state of maintenance, and so that part hasn't worked very well. I mean, I love the concept for all the benefits that you mentioned, Sharon, but the city, if we're going to double down on rain gardens, they really have to figure out how to do a better job with maintenance.
And the question with the maintenance is like, who's responsible? And lo and behold, the maintenance of the rain gardens is the responsibility of the Department of Parks, not sanitation and not DEP. And that's probably where we have the lag.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Go ahead, Ms. Tyus.
Yes, tree wells, rain gardens should be adopted by the local block association and cared for within that envelope, because you're going to have dog owners who feel that they can have their dogs use the tree wells and rain gardens to avoid their waste. And the retorts that we get from dog walkers is that it's not your property. So we need some clarification there. I spent many, many years with the Comptroller's Office on the issue of who is responsible for the tree wells. The Parks Department has the last word, but we need to come up with a intercessory type of arrangement with the locals, the local block associations to,
So one of our,
to-
thank
to-
you, Ms. Tice. One of our challenges, or one of the places where you notice to see the most uncared for rain gardens is where you have it's on public sites. So I'm specifically thinking about the rain garden that's located near the fire station at Schenectady and St. John's. Nobody cares about it, and it's become a dumping site. So this is something that you can't say that an individual block association can adopt because it's a commercial space. But that's a horse of another feather. It goes back to the general question of who's going to maintain this and what can we do to encourage better maintenance.
Yeah, let's give that some thought. I would say if it's on a block, there's a block association, they should be funded and take care of it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hold on one second, please.
Can I have the keys?
All right, guys, we are at proposal 16, only one more to go. So proposal 16 is clarify regulations for composting and recycling. Currently, zoning doesn't mention composting or recycling at all. This creates confusion about where composting and recycling are allowed to occur. DSNY's only compost facility is classified as a dump and located in a heavy M3 district on Staten Island. The proposal clarify that small-scale composting can be considered an accessory use. 2, that neighborhood-focused recycling facilities can locate in commercial storefronts. And 3, that large-scale facilities should continue to locate in manufacturing districts. What do
Ethel and I vote yes.
Totally support this one.
I vote yes as well.
And
here.
good. So, we're all about the recycling and the composting. The only thing I would add is that there are some large apartment complexes just out of our district that do not recycle at all. So adding the requirement would be a good thing.
May I also add an additional thought to recycling and composting? Like, as I am from Germany, the city offers recycling yards where you can bring your recycling, and compost, but the recycling in particular, you are not depending on just the city cleaning. You actually can go to a facility where you are being told where plastic goes, where paper goes, where electronics go. So I would love to see that actually in New York City, like a recycling facility where people can actually go and drop off their trash according to the rules.
Well, Nix, believe it or not, that actually exists, especially with electronics. It's woeful that I think there's only one site, or at least there's one site that I know of, and it's virtually inaccessible by public transit.
Yeah, okay, then it would be nice if it would be accessible and not just
Yeah.
for electronics. Like in Germany, it's really, you can recycle even, or to also include in Germany, we have glass containers where you can recycle white glass, green glass, brown glass, and you just go there and drop off your glass. And I think the whole recycling and composting issue for New York City needs to be thought about further.
I agree with you. So generally, yes, and there's more for us to do. Okay, guys, we're at proposal 17. So let's read that. It's facilitate rooftop food production. Currently, zoning allows rooftop greenhouses to be added atop non-residential buildings beyond maximum FAR and height limits. The issue is that even though there are a few straightforward requirements, all applicants are required to obtain a CPC certification that they follow the rules, increasing the cost and process and discouraging projects. Proposal, change the rooftop certification to be as of right allowance. Proposals would still be evaluated for compliance by DOB.
I support it.
Me too.
And you can't just say, I support it, and why?
Food production, fresh food.
What is a CPC certification?
City Planning Commission.
Thank you, Ethel. I couldn't even get it out of my mouth.
So if I'm reading this, what I'm hearing is that the structural integrity of a building would not be compromised. It's merely what is the city planning offering currently in the certification process?
They did not speak specifically to what the certification process is with CPC, only that it is somewhat onerous.
Yeah, you can't put a oak tree up there and expect the seedling to grow into a gigantic tree that the roof can't stand the weight, et cetera, et cetera. There are going to be weight issues for the roof.
That's why DOB, Department of Buildings, has to weigh in on it, because they would evaluate how much weight would be added to the roof by having a rooftop garden. Which has been a challenge with having more green rooftops. Green meaning, plants and such are growing on top of it. Not green in terms of more efficient.
And as I love the greenhouse idea, it's just like we spoke about solar panels earlier. So isn't there a little bit of a conflict then?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of your query, Nix?
No, I'm just like wondering, like we spoke so much about solar panels on roofs, and I love the idea of both, of greenhouses on roofs and solar panels. But if, like what's our priority? Solar panels or greenhouses? That's just my conflict, because it's both about roofs.
That's a good question. It would appear that the larger priority is on the solar panels rather than the green roofs. So it's the production of power. All right, guys, we are now at 8:36, and I'm going to leave you on your own to read the summary of the proposals, all right? And the racial equity report as it is. And just one note I'd like to make, the slide on page 58 tells you where we are in the review process, right? So one of the reasons why we push to do this is that there's a 60-day review period between April and July. This is June, and the board, this committee does meet sometime during the summer, so that we can review any incoming applications, but the board itself does not meet over the summer. So just be mindful of what our timeline is so that we understand that there'll be a public hearing in July and CPC will vote on this in August. And then that starts a 60-day clock for the city council vote. So if you have any particularly strong feelings about things that we discussed today, I would encourage you to direct it to the board office, so they might include your thoughts and concerns in the letter that we will be writing regarding our review of this process, but also that you engage in your local council with your local council people as you follow this issue, because it is an opportunity for us to really participate by having public review of this process.
Madam Chair, what is the committee statement going to read like?
We will promulgate it and we will share it. We will talk about it in the board meeting in terms of having this meeting, because also this was discussed, although in a much shorter time frame, in the EST committee meeting. But we're going to have to put heads together to have something, which of course that will be open for review. As you asked before, or as you stated before, you wanted to have minutes that's attributed thoughts to particular people. And that's, that is not how we do minutes, but it will be reflective of the diversity of thought we've had around particular issues. And even to say where we were really struggling and asking our other board members to offer input before we offer a final letter for review or response.
Thank you.
So given that we do not have people present from Hester Street, I would entertain a motion at this time for adjournment.
Motion to
You're not
adjourn.
ready. You're not ready to adjourn yet. I'm sorry.
Why? Why? What else do I have to
Committee does have to vote to present to the board the comments and concerns that were raised at tonight's meeting that will be added to the final document that the full board will create after next week's meeting. All of the committees have to review this document and provide comments. Land use committee members, you've done a great job. Inadvertently and unbeknownst to you, you also gave me a lot of feedback for us to add into our budget document and needs statement for FY 2024 and 25. So I appreciate that. But the committee, we do have to have a final vote on putting together some key areas of concern.
Julia, can you check and see if we still have quorum to be able to do that? Because several people have left.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
We have 18 participants still in the meeting.
13, 14.
Not all of them are voting.
We have 14 voting members present right now. And let me go to your...
Nix and I are 2 members.
I counted you both. That's 14. You have 20.
I have to say, I totally regret that we didn't do a speedy roll call on every single proposal. So I'm going to leave it at that and see what comes out at the end. It's going to be hamburger meat. Good night.
You have exactly half of your committee. You don't have one more than half, so it won't be official action of the committee. There are 29 29 committee members on the committee, and we seem to be losing more. There are 14 members present at this time, and that's it.
You count the Jordans as 2?
Yes.
Yes.
You're both appearing separately on the screen. Yes.
Okay, so given the fact that we do not have quorum at this juncture, we cannot make that motion, and we'll reflect that in our discussion as we present it to the full board. So once again, I say I will entertain. Thank you, Julia, for reminding us about the necessity of having to say something, that we've approved this to be discussed before and presented to the board. But given that we do not have quorum, I now will ask once again, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you all. We have done our business like nobody's business. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Object lesson for what we have to do to be prepared to limit the amount of time we have to ruminate with